Hello and welcome back. This video is for my Mac users. I'm going to show you how to run a virtual machine on a Mac, whether it's a Mac Mini or a MacBook Pro, and now whether it's an M1 processor or whether it's one of the Intel processors. We now have a product that will work on both of those platforms, chipsets, and will allow us to run the Mac operating system and then run within that an application called VMware Fusion that will allow us to install an additional operating system onto our environment and run both of them concurrently. It's very handy, it's very useful, and I'll go through that as I install Windows 10 onto a Mac system. Now, it will not affect the underlying operating system, but I'll talk about that as I create the video and as I demonstrate it to you. Let's go have a look at running Windows 10 on a Mac. Let's take a look at how I can run Windows 10 or Linux or Windows Server or any operating system on my Mac without having to reinstall or get rid of my Mac operating system. And I do that through a process called virtualization. What virtualization is going to allow me to do is effectively run an application, VMware Fusion, and I'm going to be able to create and run another operating system using VMware Fusion as if I was running two operating systems on the same set of hardware. In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing. Now, for the concepts around virtualization, I do have a couple of other videos on my channel, and I'll post links to those below. I have one on virtualization in general with a Windows machine, and I have another one where I show you how to install Windows Server on a Mac. So I'm not going to talk about the overall concepts of virtualization here. I'm just going to go through and demonstrate installing Windows 10 on my Mac and show you how I can run both Windows 10 and Mac OS at the same time on the same machine. And the good news is that VMware Fusion also works with the new M1 chipset that Mac is now putting into all of their machines. So whether you have a Mac Pro or whether you're using a Mac Mini or an iMac, VMware Fusion should work for you. Now, the best thing, of course, is to go to the VMware Fusion website, vmware.com, and look at Fusion and make sure that it's compatible with your system. But I'm going to show you on my MacBook Pro, which is a little bit of an older version of the operating system, is a little older piece of hardware, but you'll see that it works great. So what I'm going to do is I've opened up VMware Fusion, and you can see that I've got a virtual machine window here. What I can do is just through this drop down, I can create a new virtual machine, which is what I'm going to do for you. I could create a new boot camp, which actually creates a partition on my Mac so that I'm actually running Windows 10 from my Mac, and I can actually boot directly into Windows 10. With the new M1 chip, I haven't tested that out, so I'm not going to do that here. You can migrate an existing PC if you can connect it up through network or high-speed connection. You can actually pull a Windows machine and convert it to a virtual machine that runs on your Mac. You can import an existing virtual machine if you're already working with those in your environment. And then, of course, you can do a folder and you can scan your network. For virtual machines. I'm just going to go create a new one, so I'm going to go pretty plain here. So when I create a new virtual machine, I will get an installation methodology. Again, migrate, I can install and create a Mac virtual machine on my Mac. So in that case, that'd be handy for doing practice and such through the recovery partition. I can, again, import a virtual machine, a custom virtual machine, and I can even create one on a remote server if I'm running something like a VMware ESX server. This is a little bit more advanced. What I'm really going to do here is just go ahead and install from a disk image. Notice I can drag the ISO file here to start installing, so I have a Windows 10 ISO image that I've downloaded. I drop it in there, and you'll notice that it immediately detects that it's Windows 10 64-bit edition. So I can say, okay, that's what I would like to use. I could choose another disk image, but this is the one I want. And you can also see there's a Windows Server from a previous demonstration I did. So let's continue with Windows 10. And now it's going to ask me, okay, what's your account type? Put in a super secret password. So I'll put in a super secret password. And I'll put it in again. And now what I'm going to do is if I put in a product key, it'll then activate Windows. I'm not going to put in a product key. I can activate it afterwards. But for this demo, I might not keep this virtual machine, so I don't want to burn one of my licenses. So I'm going to go continue, and it says, do you want to continue without a key? Some things won't work. It's not going to be activated. That's going to be fine for this demo. And now what I can do is make a choice of my level of integration. Now, if I create it more seamless, this is going to allow me to drag files from my Mac to my Windows machine simply by dragging and dropping. This is extremely useful if you have a productivity workflow where some of your applications use Windows programs and some of your applications use Mac programs. I can do work on whatever I'm doing on my Windows machine, drag it over to my Mac, work on it on my Mac, drag it back to my Windows. Or I can create a more isolated experience where I'm really running two systems separately, not touching each other. I really do want the level that's more seamless, so it's going to share some documents, and it's going to be easier to work with the two machines together. This is more if I'm doing a production style of virtual machine, whereas the other one is more if I just want to isolate it. Maybe I'm doing something very specific on the Windows machine, and I really don't want to use it as a tool to work with my Macs. But I'm going to treat it as if I'm working with both environments. Now you'll notice it automatically says, let's go ahead and create a 60 gig hard drive with the 2 gigs of memory. That might not be enough for me, and this particular MacBook has quite a bit more RAM than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my Windows machine a little more RAM, so it's going to run a little faster, and it does take it from my Mac. So if I'm running both at the same time, you know, each one's going to take a little bit of the available resources there. And I really want to change the capacity of my hard drive because maybe I'm going to be installing Microsoft Office, or I'm going to install a Windows application on there, so I can play with this. For the purposes of this demo, I'll leave the 60 gig hard drive, but what I will is I will go in, and I'm going to go in and I can say, okay, we're going to call it the Windows 10, and we can save this configuration. So now we go in here, it's going to open up a menu bar where I can go into the settings, and this is where I'll adjust the memory. So underneath processors and memory, you're not going to be able to increase your processor cores. You can't exceed what your host system or what your Mac has, but you can see it's 16 gigs on the Mac. So let's go ahead and make this Windows machine here. Let's go ahead and make it 8192. So make it 8 gigs of RAM in there, and you can even go into some more advanced options in there, but I'm going to make it 8192 in there, and you'll see that it will calculate shortly thereafter just how much is left for my Mac. And go there, hit return, and you can see it's going to leave 8 for the Mac, 8 for the Windows machine, kind of dividing evenly between the two. Say OK to this, and now I simply start this virtual machine. It says I'm going to be running it with side channel mitigations. This is a more secure way of running it. If I want, what I can do is go into the settings. So I can go back into the settings and I can disable the side channel mitigations. But I'm going to leave it a little bit more secure here, and I'm going to leave those on. I'll take a little bit of a hit on the performance of the virtual machine. So now this virtual machine is ready to go, and it will start up the process of simply installing Windows 10 for me. So I'm going to let it install Windows, and I'll pause the video every so often and just let the virtual machine install itself. You'll see the setup starts as if I'm running a completely new Windows setup, as if this was a fresh machine. But of course you can see back here I've got my Mac OS X is still running, and in this little window, in this little VMware Fusion window, it's as if I'm opening a machine inside a machine. It's like the Russian dolls, where a little doll goes into a bigger doll, goes into a bigger doll, and you know, if you ever want to watch a great movie while you're waiting for this machine to install, watch Bill Murray and the Man Who Knew Too Little. It's worth it just for the Russian doll scene. But while it's doing this, I'll let the video do its thing and pause it so you'd have to watch the whole thing. As you can see, it's going to go through and install everything. It does take a little time, but you can do other things. You walk away because you don't have to interact with the setup. It's basically an automated script, and you're going to have Windows installed in just a few moments. It'll go out to the internet, it'll do all of the updates, and then it'll restart, and you'll find that it's pretty fast. So on a regular computer with Windows 10, I would normally recommend that you have about a minimum of 4 gigs of RAM dedicated to it. So this isn't going to be a great solution unless your Mac has a minimum of 8 gigs of RAM, and that's giving 4 to the Windows machine, 4 to the Mac host system. But I would even recommend that 16 would be the minimum I'd be comfortable with, sort of an 8 and 8 split. And of course, the more RAM, the better. You can actually run more than one virtual machine at the same time. So you could run your Mac OS 10, which is running behind the scenes here, and then you could install Windows 10, and you could install Windows Server, and then you could even practice doing client server things. But I would just say that the main reason that I would install Windows 10 on my Mac is to get access to those applications that simply won't run on a Mac, and then have that Windows 10 machine or that available option so I can run it when I don't have an application that I have a Mac equivalent for. And here is our Windows environment. Now, one of the things with Windows is in order to log in, you have to hit Control-Alt-Delete. To do that on a virtual machine, up top you'll see you have a menu here. You can go in and you can actually send Control-Alt-Delete to the machine, and now it'll go there. I'll put in my super secret password. Hopefully I put it in correctly. And then it'll allow me to start working with Windows. You'll notice that it'll ask to get to my network, so I'll say yes to that. And you'll notice that there's a VMware share here. That's going to allow me to put files into here and have them shared with my Mac. It's just changed the screen resolution here. So what's happened is it's actually installing something called VMware Tools to make the screen adapt. So it's put a video driver, so you see it'll scale the window as necessary, which is a handy feature. So we'll let it do its thing. Again, I'll go to virtual machine. I was getting a little ahead of myself there. Hit the Control-Alt-Delete, super secret password. So one of the nice things about having those special video drivers installed, that's why it flickered and had to do the restart there. If I just scale the window, notice it'll fill up the window. So that's really handy with applications. There are some other things you can do. For example, I can actually put a special mode in here called Unity, which hides the Windows interface, and it just runs Windows applications on top of the Mac OS, so it appears that you have a computer that's running both Windows and Mac applications. What's really happening there is that the virtual machine's running in the background and it's controlling the Windows applications, but it's very handy. You can go things like resize it to different visuals there. You can go in and resize it to fit a window. By default, you can go to a full screen mode so everybody thinks that you're running Windows on your Mac completely. Now what's neat here is that when I turn this machine off, so if I go into power and I shut down this machine, it will now return any resources it was using for memory and processor back to the Mac. So I can then, say I'm doing video editing or something, and I don't want those 8 gigs that I have to be taken away from my Mac OS, I can simply turn off the virtual machine. Everything gets returned back to the Mac, except for, of course, the hard drive space. That's still something that Windows needs to use, but I now have a machine I can start up at any time and be able to work with my Windows 10 environment.